Welcome to Atari Speed Reading. With a strong personal commitment to become an efficient reader, individuals using Atari Speed Reading will learn to be flexible readers, able to read at double and triple their normal speeds on certain materials, and capable of slowing down but still reading more effectively on the difficult materials. A flexible reader knows how to read for maximum efficiency and personal enjoyment. Decide now to become that flexible reader by improving your reading skills and capabilities.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. The Atari Speed Reading software package was released by Atari in 1981. It was a self-paced program for use with the Atari computer and a cassette drive that promised to teach you to increase reading speed and comprehension with 30 days of practice. The package contained a workbook and 5 cassette tapes. This is an interview with two of the people who created the Atari Speed Reading package. Karlyn Kamm created the speed reading educational material at the University of Wisconsin with Dr. Wayne Otto. In 1975, she and Dr. Otto published a book titled Speedway, the Action Way to Read. Dr. Otto died in 2017. Brad Oltrogge is president of Multi-Learning Systems, the software publisher that was contracted by Atari to turn Kamm and Otto's speed reading material into a product for the Atari home computer. This interview took place on April 16, 2020. Check the show notes at ataripodcast.com for links to the speed reading software and the workbook, Dr. Otto's obituary, and other materials related to Atari Speed Reading.
If you want to start from the beginning, it was a long time ago. I met Dr. Otto was my major professor. So I was at the University of Wisconsin getting a master's degree and started working with him. When I signed up with the program, met him right away. I think at that, maybe not right away. He was later chair of the department, and he would always take on several graduate students. So pretty soon after that, to try and cut through, he was part of the Wisconsin Research and Development Center, which was an organization within the university that got different grants for different things. Mm-hmm. They'd have an English component, and they'd get grants from some federal English project that was looking for people to do certain things. We were a reading department, and the grant that we received, that the Research and Development Center received, was under the reading umbrella, so to speak. And Dr. Otto was what they call the principal investigator of the project. So actually, before I even finished my master's, I was working with him in this project, looking to structure the grant. And we had an idea for a project we would develop, which was called ultimately the Wisconsin Design for Reading Skill Development. And we looked at our focus was looking at reading skills that kids needed in elementary school, basically, to put together good readers. And obviously some kids would take off and they didn't need this so much, but the design of the program was to help teachers teach reading skills, break down the skills for kids who weren't, having more difficulty getting the whole reading skill put together. So we focused on that and developed a program around that. And it took several years of development. But along the way, in this focus and word attack and comprehension and study skills, we branched off. Dr. Otto, had interests in a lot of different, call them satellite projects. And speed reading just happened to be one. Well, I happened to have a background in speed reading when I was actually in college, and also while I was getting my master's, I I took a speed reading course at the university, had taken several before, and then ended up teaching it at the university as well. So I had an interest, and that's kind of all it took. So we decided to combine our knowledge. We thought, well, let's put this down. Primarily at that point, we hadn't met Brad or the other gentleman who was head of Highsight at the time, and talked about our ideas, but we were primarily thinking of the educational environment. We put together a program for teachers, to work with. Subsequently, after we put this together, I believe it was originally in a book, kind of similar to a journal article, sort of. We started working with the company called Highsight and the individual who was head of it. And he said, gee, that could be something I'd like to market. And that was kind of the beginning there. Brad was involved probably, I think Brad from the rest of the time forward figured out how to market it, get an ad agency in there. And from that point on, Dr. Otto and I were involved mainly as a consultation, like, would this approach work or this approach or whatever, but the actual publication of it, designing it for the public, so to speak, was more in Brad's bailiwick, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair way to put it, Brad?
Well, yeah, I think so. I got involved more in the marketing side, and then from with the original program that Dr. Otto and Karlyn created,
Mm-hmm.
but then took it from there ultimately to Atari.
How did you two meet?
I met Karlyn through Highsight Corporation. I was working for Highsight.
Yeah.
And Highsight really became what I would call the publisher of the program that they developed. So, and I was working with Highsight, and that's how I met Karlyn. Then eventually, I ended up buying this part out, the speed reading program from Highsight Corporation before it became an Atari speed reading product. And I worked with Atari to modify it so that it would become a program that could be used on, the original was the Atari 400 and the 800
Right.
computers.
Karlyn, so you and Dr. Otto had a book that came out in 1975 called Speedway, the Action Way to Read.
Correct. Yes. And we were writing it again. It's to understand it, you have to realize that we were working within the Research and Development Center, and that was an educational focus.
Mm-hmm.
So we put this together as it had very sound educational principles. And after we got done, then in contact, as I said, the gentleman's name at Highsight at that point, my contact, who I had known previously, his name was Peter Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we got talking with Peter, and I honestly don't remember the original context for talking about Speedway, but for speed reading. But Peter was quite interested, and maybe Brad, I don't know, at that point he was looking for an educational product or something. It just kind of came about, but we ended up having several meetings. I remember talking about the concept, and we said, hey, we've got this thing here that'll work.
Yeah, Highsight was at the time looking to basically diversify, and within the Highsight Corporation, we needed to take the material that Karlyn and Dr. Otto had put together and created raised some outside funding investments, and we put together a product that we could take to the public. It was designed originally so that it could be sold directly to individual users as a self-study program. But we then had other universities picked up the program too, and they used it with college students and adults. And then even beyond that, we took that same core program and we started teaching it to corporations and government agencies around the country. And then what happened is one day I got a call from the University of Montana where they'd been using the program in the reading lab, the Speedway reading program. The guy says, I've been working with these computers. I think there's an opportunity here to take this and take parts of it and put it into a computer program, supplement it with a print-based piece, and I think there'd be interest out there. So we went to various companies, and Atari was the one that said, yeah, we'd like to have that. And so they helped fund the conversion from the original print and audio cassette-based program to a computer program that had some supplementary print-based materials as well as activities that could be used on the Atari 400 and 800 for teaching speed reading. So that's how we moved from the original format to a Atari computer-based program.
Okay.
So we worked with Atari and the University of Montana. There were some students there that worked on it, the software side of it, and so we created the package over about if I recall, it took about 9 months to actually get it developed, repackaged, and get it onto the market.
Mm-hmm.
Early 80s. It was, if I recall, I think it was 81 that took place. So it was ready for Christmas buying season, I think, of 81, I believe.
That sounds about right.
I'm not sure if it's 80, 81, or 82, right in that time frame.
Yeah, I was going to see if I could look at the copyright. It says copyright 1981 on the manual. So.
Yeah. So
what was the year?
81.
Okay.
Christmas of
81.
Late fall.
Atari contracted Highsight to make the conversion. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, during that period of time, Highsight Corporation, that I worked for, decided to really move out of the speed reading area because they were going into other directions. And I bought. I set up a company, Learning Multi-Systems, and bought the rights to the speed reading program. And so then Learning Multi-Systems, I was the president of it, it was the company that actually contracted with Atari.
All right. So it was your company that created the product.
Actually,
really,
the ultimate Atari speed reading product. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you recall approximately what they paid for this product? I mean, what was the contract worth?
Yeah, we had three components to it. We had a specific dollar amount for development. I think it was in the range of $25,000. And then there was a royalty that they would pay per copy. I'm thinking it was like in the 10% range of the retail. And then there was it was our responsibility to actually not only develop that product, but to produce the end product. So we subcontracted with suppliers to do the various pieces, then packaged it and shipped it to them. And then we got paid a certain dollar amount per unit. If I recall, it was in the neighborhood of $16. And over the life of the product, we probably sold about 80,000 units to them, 8,000 copies, and they retailed, I believe, at 75 in that ballpark per copy.
So great memory, Brad.
Yeah. So from a business perspective, was it a worthwhile project, Brad?
Yes. Yeah, it was very worthwhile.
Okay.
Yeah. It was. I would have liked to have gone longer.
Sure.
But in the short time that it existed, it was, for us, it was good. Yeah, there were, it was a kind of thing where at the time the economy was not very stable. It was a time when we had double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates, and double-digit unemployment all at the same time. So there was, it was sort of a bubble there. When the computers were coming out and the software for those computers was coming out, it peaked, hit a peak, and then dropped off very quickly for various reasons. But economy was one part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a kind of a trendy thing. And then it kind of, there were a lot of players that got into it, Atari being one.
Mm-hmm.
But you had the Commodore and Coleco and Apple.
Right.
Later on, I think it was wasn't it the IBM Junior or something like that?
PC Junior. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's various a lot of competition in the market. Radio Shack was involved. So there was a lot of different pieces. Yeah.
Mm.
In a question for both of you, Karlyn first. Was speed reading a fad in the 70s?
That's a tough question, and I think it's a two-part answer. If you look at the focus or the attention it was giving, that might have been a little faddish, because I think it had enjoyed the whole concept in the educational world of speed reading, had enjoyed different bubbles throughout the history. And there were certainly people, well-known researchers, professors, who spent a lot of time with it. And I don't even remember how I got interested in it, but I took a speed reading course like before college. And so it was always there if you were interested in it. As an educational skill, it is way underrated and will always be a component in a good reading development program. In other words, high schools should pay attention to it. They often don't, because they have enough trouble. It falls off a little bit like the arts, falls off the bandwagon real quickly when you have to devote a teacher's salary and time and kids' chunk of the day to that skill. But it's a solid skill. It just has had different experiences with prominence as far as attention. And someone like good handwriting, I mean, they don't even teach it anymore. And that right. They expect people to get through the stuff now online. And I think also the shift to online reading and research also shifted the attention away. Not that really should, because kids are reading, say, their history chapters online now as opposed to out of a book. Maybe the scrolling or something, there just isn't the attention to it. I don't feel after, certainly in the last couple decades, there isn't.
Yeah.
But it happened to be, as I said, Dr. Otto had a myriad of interests, and I particularly had that interest. So our putting together the book was kind of a natural. We put together a lot of different books and wrote journal articles on different topics. But it was no question that the speed reading was probably top of our list to talk about.
Brad, do you have any thoughts on the faddishness of speed reading?
Oh, yeah, I do. From the marketing side, yes. And certainly it's had its peaks and valleys. And quite frankly, there was a company, the Evelyn Wood program, that did a lot of promotion of speed reading, created a lot of public attention, And that promotion created not only interest, but desire of people to go and take speed reading courses. And personally, with this program, I taught hundreds of classes over a period of time. They were not very long classes; they're like 12-hour classes. But when I say 12 hours in the classroom. And I taught it to corporations and government agencies all over the country. And a lot of interest in it. But Evelyn Wood did the consumer classroom approach, did a lot of advertising to get people interested in taking the course, and that helped us actually. Created interest in speed reading in general. And so it was a very positive time, and we rode a little bit on the tails of that interest, certainly, and we delivered a very good product, but but that helped us. And I'm not sure of the history of what happened with the Evelyn Wood program, but you don't hear nearly as much about it, and so you don't, so that generation of public interest is not being fueled right now by anybody that I'm aware of.
Right.
I'm not aware of any other side interests either, and my bet is it's going to be the transference to the screen. It's just people perceive it differently, whether it is actually different or not.
Right.
Another question.
Brad, you mentioned that you had to deliver all of the pieces of the product to Atari, and I'm curious about that. What specifically do you mean? Were you developing like finished manuals and finished batches of cassettes in a binder, or what granularity did they need?
Yeah, that's correct. It was the finished product in that 3-ring binder with 5 cassettes and about I don't know, I'm guessing it was about 150-page manual.
224
activities in that manual. Is that what there is? 224, yeah. And so, if you've got that there, that's what we actually delivered, shrink wrapped. I don't know, it was in maybe 22 a carton, and they would buy them. I didn't think the initial order was the initial order that we contracted with them was 5,000 units. But before we could get that developed and completed, they changed the order from 5,000 and went all the way up to 45,000 units that we delivered in the first delivery.
Wow.
Advance orders. So it moved that quickly. And so we were on a changing, it was changing, quite rapidly before we went into production, what it is that we had to deliver. And so it was a substantial first delivery.
I bet.
Yeah, so I think the
and this was your new company's first product, really, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, we were publishing the original speed reading program that we bought from HiSight, but this was then our first adventure into software. Yeah.
Do you remember anything about the actual mastering of the audio tapes? Because as I understand it, that was pretty complicated. Yeah. There were 2-track tapes, and you had audio on one channel and the computer code on the other channel. Were you involved in making that happen?
Well, I worked with a subcontractor that Atari directed me to, because they wanted the standards to be there. And so it was a company in California that did the production of those for us. And they had big center set up for testing. They had, I don't know how many testers, individuals, testing these on the Atari 400s. They had a big bank of computers in there that they would test the cassettes to make sure they were up. It was I'm not a technical person on the how that information is put on the cassette, but there was like, it's the amplitude or something like that. It has to be at certain levels all the way through the production to make it work. It was a short-lived technology.
Yes, that's for sure. Do you remember the name of that contractor?
Yeah. I do not. do not, and I'm not sure I could go back and find it any place either. Somebody told me the name, I might be able to say, yeah, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
But gosh, it's been too long. Too long.
That's all right.
There might be someplace in my archives. There might be some information about it that if I had somebody do some searching here, we could find it.
If you find it, it would be fascinating. Especially if you had the contracts or invoices or any of that stuff from Atari. That would be an amazing bit of history if you happen to dig it up.
Yeah, I got a few things that I saved from the Atari era. I've got a few copies of the Atari Speed Reading, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Got Atari 800 yet.
Nice.
Nice. Had to keep that, at least one Atari 800. We had a large number of them around here. But anyway,
that blows my. That could go in a museum. Jeez.
Well, yeah.
Can't believe you
disk
had
drives for it.
Oh,
we had 30, 40 computers at one time of Atari 400s and 800s because we did a lot of testing and all of software and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you create other software for Atari or for anyone else?
For other platforms, yes. Over the years, we've been in software ever since. We've gone to a different market than the consumer market. We've mostly stayed in the educational marketplace, K-12.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we focused. Part of the reason we did that is because in the consumer market, it's a very quick, rapid changing environment. You know, the platforms change, the computers change, the interest of the buyer changes so fast. By the time you develop something and get it to market, you can miss that window of opportunity. So you have such a short time to recover money. Well, within the educational market, when they buy a particular version of computers, they will stay with that for quite a period of time. You might have 5-6 years to recoup your money once you've invested it in it. So we went to a little more, what I would call, a little easier market to deal with than the consumer market. And we were fortunate with Atari that we got in. We recovered what our investments were, and we made some money. But, you know, the cassette tape was not a good delivery for a very long period of time. And Atari then had some struggles after that for a while to do with the computers and things like that, just because of the general market and direction, you know, maybe. And they're strong, I think, down the road as they went along was their game-based products. So,
Karlyn, did you have something you were going to say?
No, I'm just, listen, this is, so much of it is new, Brad, because I have forgotten it's funny, I remember things you're talking about. I remember bits and pieces because we were obviously talking during all that time and working on, I don't know, whatever stuff. But, those details just went out the window for me. Oh, gosh.
What? Yeah, well, Karlyn, you were on a different side of the
totally.
event happening, you know. Yeah. So it's two different things.
So I'm curious how you two worked together. I mean, what were you collaborating on? It sounds like that, Brad, that you might have had questions about how to implement the stuff that was in Karlyn's program.
Well, the way we collaborated on the Atari project, because we brought in other kinds of activities that are computer-based with the print-based activities and audio support program that was with us. We used them to help develop the audio part that went down on the cassettes on the one track, and then we also used them to marry the print-based materials into a self-study program that would work with the computer activities that were done. So they helped us put that all together so the directions and the flow of it would be appropriate and have the best outcome in the final product. So they were that subject matter expertise that we still needed to convert from the original product to the Atari Speed Reading product. So we collaborated on that over that 9 months
just marketing and
development period.
General,
A little bit on the marketing.
Like you said, you divided it up. You divided it up, and we just make sure the content was consistent, and basic consulting. I would say once we had put the book together, our role from then on was just consulting on it, given the needs of the adaptation to the computer or adaptation to a business class versus an educational setting. We would just make sure that the directions and the continuity of it was, stayed the same.
Do you recall any problems or hurdles that had to be addressed?
No, Brad, you brought up that pacer. Remember when we were talking?
Yeah.
And that had some inherent problems, and I remember working on those kind of. That was
what we did with that
adaptation.
Karlyn, yes, that was an activity that changed, and we worked that into a computer activity, which would pace a learner and how fast they would need to be reading. It was kind of an activity that forced the reader almost into reading faster than they would, because of the way it was highlighting phrases on the screen. And you could set the speed of that just like you would with what was called a pacer, which was a mechanical device that was used with the original program. But this was a pacer on the screen that would help you inherently pick up your reading speed, and became really a kind of a motivational tool to do that. You had to stay with that pacing speed on the screen. So that was one activity that was created for it. And that took a little bit to do. We had to work with students and get their input on it and that kind of thing. And but it wasn't a major problem. I'm trying to think of probably the most difficult was put the whole agreement together at the beginning. That was the most challenging part, how to structure it. It was so that it made sense for all the parties involved, and that took a little bit of time. But from the content side and the actual product side, that wasn't so difficult. The other thing was difficult, though, is what you had mentioned earlier there, Kevin, the cassette tapes, and being able to have those manufactured to a specification that was good quality, that would still work on a 400 computer with input from what I call the cassette drive. And cassette drives weren't real good at the time. That's why they didn't last long. That's why it wasn't long. We had the 5 1/4 inch floppy disk and then 3 1/2 inch.
Did either of you get any feedback from customers, from Atari, from anybody?
I got feedback along the way that was pretty positive. During that high time, whatever it was, 81, 82. And I kind of forget where the source of the feedback, whether it was, I was still, pretty much, I was still consulting at the R&D Center, mainly with Brad then. We kind of went into that. The project had ended at the University of Wisconsin at the Research and Development Center. That one had been completed. And so I had a lot more free time then, and I ended up mainly consulting, and then we got into some more projects, if I remember, and, I'd do some writing for that, and that was the basis of the consulting. But we were still quote unquote out and about and would
Mm-hmm.
get some feedback that at the time was very positive. I always thought, or maybe I don't know, no one said anything if they, they didn't, but
well, we had
usually it's the reverse. Yeah.
We would get calls in occasionally because we were a publisher of it, support calls maybe for it and that kind of thing. But no, we had pretty good feedback on it, and then and it's used too. Then and the general speed reading part of it is not only the computer version, but on the ones that for government agencies where we went in and taught it for government agencies and corporations for their employee development programs. They'd have us come back all the time. But so we did a lot of those for many years.
Yeah, the solid foundation of the program was that it was educationally, the concept was very solid and very helpful to people. If nothing else, after their practice, they had an awareness of a lot of different reading skills. And that's very valuable to someone who's charged with covering so much content, maybe being a little intimidated by the amount of background and knowledge they should get, and to get some real pointers on how to get a hold of that and come out on top was a pretty good feeling for a lot of people. I don't think you measure the results just on, I read it X words per minute, and now I read it, X times X. That wasn't the total goal of the program. Certainly you should be more accomplished and be a little faster, but there were a lot of embedded skills in there, and learning how to look for keywords, learning when it was appropriate to scan and skim versus more careful reading. A lot of people approach their work at one speed, and I think the awareness of there are different strategies and use them all was very valuable to people. And it sounds like a simple concept, but people, whether it's in education or business, who are tasked with covering a lot of material, can stand to gain by consciously thinking of the skills they're using, as opposed to getting your cup of coffee and, here's page 1 and I got to go to page 800. They'd be a little more mindful and focused, I think, after taking the course.
Yeah, unquestionably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot to talk about if you talk about speed reading and just improved reading strategies in general. There's a lot to be talked about and people to learn. And like she says, is being able to control the volume of information coming across a person's desk or online. Now you've got information coming from so many different directions that a lot to absorb. And what are the strategies for doing that? I always look at it as one of the things that not every word on the page contributes equally to what's being communicated. And writers try to put information, and good writers try to structure information in such a way to make it easier for the reader to be able to complete the communication that they want. And so as a reader, you need to be looking somewhat from the perspective of a writer and what they're trying to communicate and how they're doing it. And if you can kind of see that structure ahead of time, then when you attack that reading task, you can do it more efficiently. And so it's not just speed. We call it speed reading. It's not just speed of how fast you go over the material. It's one word at a time or anything like that. It's quite a bit different than that. So that's what they learn in a course like this, is to how to attack reading tasks. efficiently.
Did this Atari product, do you feel like it covered everything that you would have taught in the book or in your 12-hour course?
Probably not. No, I would say no, because you have ways of taking the information, and relate, and the way groups relate to it, so you have another dynamic there. That when you teach it in a live setting, you have another dynamic, that more than one actually, that's going on, and so you can sit back and maybe explain things, or somebody doesn't understand something and they question, and you can interact with that user. But to develop a lot of the skills, it's in there. The format, and if you go through the course, the Atari course, you would be much better. I'm not sure it would be the same. Wouldn't be the same experience though if you went as you going to probably to a class. Different experience.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What haven't I asked you about that time that I should have, Karlyn?
Oh, my. We are talking 40 years ago. Yeah. I think you've basically covered it, how people get together and ideas form. How did all the projects come about? It's the human interest side of it. I think the Speedway, as I always called it, was a natural evolution of that process. Two people, working together that have a common interest, and you explore it a little bit and put some ideas together, and that's really how this whole thing evolved. And maybe the other products for Atari were the same. Who knows? But it certainly is that way continuing today with software development. People get ideas, or you're trying to, the change in technology is so phenomenal that always having to adapt, you wonder how to adapt your current product, but also how to take advantage of the new aspects and the new technology. Leaves a lot of challenges out there. So, and this product certainly reflected that, as Brad has said, the example of the cassette technology. You're influenced whenever you get in the tech world, you're influenced by the advance as well as the lack of quality of the current technology, and it shapes the product. And maybe, the whole program would have had a little bit longer life if it had hit the technology wave a little differently. That's possible when you have all the factors. Why some are going to play a greater role than others. But I don't know. I think you've conquered the aspects of how it came to be.
Okay, thank you. Brad, same question. What haven't I asked you about that time that I should have?
Well, it was a very exciting time, I can tell you that. Go out to Atari, San Jose area, lots of buildings filled with people, and it was everything was happening at one time, I can tell you that. And so it was a lot of fun, and it was the beginning of computers, personal computers, and so it was very exciting. And I was glad I had a chance to experience some of that, and it got us as a company. It got us really started into the computer business that we've been in, computer software business that we've been in for all these years. And without Atari, that would not have happened for us. I can tell you that. As a company.
Wow.
Yeah, as a company. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, Brad, you said you went out to Atari a few times, traveled out there. Was it all meetings and boring, or did they wine and dine you? Did you see any of the fun stuff that Atari might have shown you?
Oh yeah, yeah. We didn't do the whining and dining so much, but we did. When we were there, you wouldn't spend the whole day in meetings or anything like that. They had their games up, and you'd have a chance to play some of the games. I was quite a bit younger then. I really enjoyed them then. And, they had the Pac-Man and the asteroids and some of these up. And oh gosh, you had a lot of fun. You get a group of excited people about them together. Yeah, no, it was just it was fun as well as work. And we were usually on work missions, so we limited some of the fun, but we had some fun. The whole history there, it changed over time because of the downturn, but so it was a little different later in it. But when it was rolling, it was a lot of fun.
So I was going to ask you both what you do today. Brad, you mentioned that your company still exists and still making software. Tell me about what you do today.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty much over years we developed a lot of software, and about I'd say a cycle of about 5 years all the way through, you had to reinvest, develop the next round, and then recover money. Well, I got to a certain age. I said, it's not worth the risk of putting a lot of money into the next round of development of what we were doing. And we're going to just gradually move away from software development, which we have now. We have moved away from the software development. We used to do a lot of the educational trade shows and things like that. Moved away from some of that. We just have some distribution. And so we're really downsized to just supporting some of our people that do third-party distribution of our products. And so I've kind of, instead of selling it, where somebody else had to take on the responsibilities of the next wave of development, I decided we would just gradually downsize, and as we downsize, we removed some expenses and remain profitable, and just it's kind of written it out now. And and I don't expect I would go back into product development myself, because I just wouldn't want to take that investment risk. We are a private company, and it's basically no investors other than myself, and so that's how I'm handling the exit from the business.
Okay. Karlyn, what do you do these days?
Well, that's a good question. It's a real myriad of things. Just to kind of back up to explain how I can do what I'm doing is that, as I mentioned at the beginning of all of this, Dr. Otto was my major professor. And starting right then, through all the years of the project, which at the university ended around 1980, 81, I worked with him like day in and day out, writing and most of it was research, writing for journals, making presentations. But boy, did I learn a lot. And it was incredible. And then I continued kind of writing, consulting with Brad and helping him put content together for some of his programs that he was later working on. And so I did that. And then when all of that need for content tapered off, I really morphed over with all the skills that I had learned from working with Dr. Otto. I morphed into professional editing, and never have done it on a large scale basis. But I did have kind of an interesting experience. And is the one regret, Brad, that I have that I could never tell Wayne, and that is a big regret. But I entered a contest a few years ago, an editing contest. Do not ask me why I did this, but I wanted to write. It was for a political candidate, and I wanted to edit their materials. And they had a nationwide search for a team of editors. and they selected 7, and I was one of the 7. And I have to give full credit to Dr. Otto that, he was just a brilliant writer naturally. And of course he was smart, so he honed his own skills as he went along. And I'm not sure who his writing mentor was. I could give a few guesses, but he certainly helped those of us who worked with him. So it allowed me this other area of interest that I've certainly explored in the professional editing. And that's just kind of dwindled. We have our own family business that I work on with my husband. So right now I spend most of my time, but I'm still working with all the grandchildren over the phone, doing our editing and writing. So it'll probably always be there in some form or another.
Great. If you could send a message to the people who are still using Atari computers today, what would you tell them, Brad?
Well, I would thank them and all Atari users for helping us get a great start. And that was, and I admire that people are still using them. That's a positive. They had some good computers along the way, and but I'd have to thank them.
All right, good answer. Karlyn?
I would have to say, don't panic that it's an old program. It's just the principles and what you're learning are just as good today as they were then. So the only thing that may seem backward would be the technology, but not the content of the program.
So people could still learn better reading skills from this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's considered in the educational world kind of a study skill. There's different classifications of skills, like a word attack skill is simply being able to understand a vowel from a consonant and what sounds it makes. And then you have comprehension, which is understanding, the topic sentence and the supporting details and being able to support that out. But there's a group of skills called study skills, understanding how to read bars and graphs, for example, understanding maps and the relationship of yourself, to two-dimensional representation. And all those skills are very important. In fact, I did, in the context not of speed reading, but in study skills, we did quite a few studies, and I have a book out on that. But again, is much older now, but the concepts in there aren't. And we did a test of adults versus 6th graders. And we had the 6th graders marked into 2 groups, one who had gone through our study skills program, one who hadn't. And then the adults were just random. Anybody. They could have been college graduates or not, who knew what they knew about study skills. And the one thing we found, we tested on maps, bars, graphs, all kinds of directional kinds of things. Without studying and learning study skills, you do not perform well. And many, many of the adults did not perform well. None of the kids who had not had study skills did very well at all on the test. But the group of kids, and I always remember that because I had taught them, so it impressed me, but that had the study skills did the best by far. And again, it's this whole awareness thing is basically what it is. It isn't that it's such hard concepts that no one can get it, but you'd be surprised at the adults who cannot read a map and don't get the orientation, have trouble with that spatial orientation and understanding what different maps convey. Anyway, this was in the area of study skills, but the speed reading kind of fell into that bailiwick. And, kind of unfortunately is one of the skills that teachers don't have time to teach. They don't teach all the study skills very well. And again, that's a time a reflection of the time constraint in the curricula out there. But speed reading isn't taught either, and yet people can profit very, very much by being aware of those strategies. So they should feel good. If they want to spend the time on an old program, they will get something out of it.
I think I have what I need. Thank you both very much for your time.
Okay. Yeah.
Very good.
Terrific.
Thank you, Kevin.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.